the number of Nigerians who rely on mass transport to be able to carry out their livelihoods?
That is quite contradicting now. How can you say because we are 64? Will you say because we are 64, you will now and 64 minister? Will you say we are 64, you will now do a lot of things that has to do with 64? This is much more challenging. You should launch like 64,000, not 64. So you can also launch 64,000 now. It's possible. That's what we are. I think it's a serious issue. We shouldn't even try to make it maybe not something. Don't let us make it something that is not serious. It's a serious issue that you need to take charge of. Why will you launch 64 when you promised 3,000?
Well, it's a recall 64,000, and I'm thinking that particularly with the 774 local government structure, that would be a good number to address it. But let's also pick on our third issue in the news this morning. A lot of Nigerians following the outcome of the hashtag End Bad Governance protest, we're looking at the hashtag Fearless in October protest with keen eyes. Now, whilst there was a low turnout of protesters across major cities in Nigeria, there were some incidences of tear gas being used to dispel protesters. Let's get your thoughts on what you think in some states might have marred the turnout of protesters, as against some displays we saw in Lagos, which are said to be politically motivated by the likes of Shore.
Right. I think the protest was well announced that there will be Fearless October, and because of that, police take to street, especially in Abuja, and making sure that it does not actually happen. But it was successful in Lagos or among other states. But I think we should come to terms in this government that protest is one of our rights, and they should be allowed to protest because this is a good protest. I would say that, and I will not even agree that it's politically motivated because politically motivated and serious protest will not have a date, will not have a time. It will just be spontaneous here and there. But Nigeria also, will I say, kind to this president that we don't even experience that. And those that want to actually carry out the protest, they announced it, and even the leader, Showore, led the in Lagos. So that simply means that they actually plan what they actually want to do. But we want to encourage the security agency, especially Nigerian police, to make it not worse because their disposition also matter at this point in time. If you are protesting and you are giving them serious fights, it's also lead to another thing. But if they are protesting, make sure you guide them alongside the protest. That really makes more sense compared to trying to harass them, trying to intimidate them, trying to push them out of the protest. I think we should be much more civil and democratic in doing things in Nigeria.
Now, there's still some protesters reportedly incarcerated following their participation in street processions, despite court orders restricting protests to certain venues in states. Now, on that part, human rights activists have talked about the fact that it is a constitutional right. Now, whilst we see this arrest in some cases, tear gas being used, many still ask the question of if indeed we are practicing a democracy. Do you think that these are some of the attributes as to why persons question the sort of democracy Nigeria is practicing?
Right. To actually make sure or you gag or make sure that people are confined in a particular area is undemocratic and it doesn't really follow what guides protest. Protest can happen any day, anytime, and everyone have right to protest. So for you to guide them to a particular place, it's a serious issue. Perhaps I think that's guiding of people, or maybe make sure people are remaining in one particular place. It was for end bad governance. I don't think there is a court order for fearless October. More so, I think it's quite challenging sometimes. It's not people that those that are actually enjoying protest to the extent that it's even bring them to governance are actually now stopping people from protesting. It is what we need to speak on because if you think it's not affecting you now, tomorrow it may actually affect you and you need to protest and you also be said, no, you cannot move everywhere. This is where you are supposed to be. I think there should be freedom to actually protest any day, anytime.
Now, another issue in the news, and this one has to do from the economic perspective. The LCCI has made recommendations calling on Nigeria to diversify its sources of revenue to curb an overdependence on oil. What do you make of this, especially noting that We're not meeting our OPEC quota. Production targets continues to decline. Crude oil theft has been blamed on it. How valuable are these recommendations coming in from the LCII at this point in time?
Are quite valid. You recall that successive administration have been talking about diversification, and I can score President Muhammad Buhari to an extent because what he did in agriculture, especially rice, you could see that we are able to be self-sufficient to an extent. Then we talk about local rice now. He has been able to diversify to an extent. I was expecting this president also to key in with and actually diversify because if you don't diversify, it becomes a serious problem. You are going to admit that let's even leave the language of diversification. Why not make sure we face what employ Nigeria more, which is agriculture? So if you can face our agriculture sector very well, which employ about over 50% of Nigerians, and we have not even tapped into the value chain because the value chain is so enormous that we need to look into and actually work on. So I think it's good we diversify. That would have reduced pressure on oil and gas, our export, because now all our income is 95% from oil and gas, and we must do something because if you look at even the word oil and gas now globally, it's getting little. People are challenging it gradually. We have seen electric vehicle, we have seen alternative source of energy. A lot of things are coming up. So I think it's the right time for us to diversify. If we make sure we face our agriculture, fix our manufacturing sector, this would have helped to actually diversify our economy. I think we should be intentional and that's why I have issue with this government in terms of their blueprints to actually develop Nigeria economy. Some government will come on board and say, okay, this is our short-term plan, medium-term plan, and long-term plan. This is our aim to diversify the economy so that the private sector, the state government, we can all key to it, and by keying to it, we'll make sure that we'll achieve that aim of diversifying the economy. But contrary to that, we only see that these governments are much more reactive. When there's an issue, they quickly find solution to it. Meanwhile, they're supposed to be proactive to plan, so that when you plan for your economy, you can easily guide it towards your plan, and people will support you in achieving it. For me, I don't think there's anything bad if we start from now and said we want to have so tons of maybe ginger, maybe of cassava, maybe of this as we have in rice. Because of that, we can actually now put some intentional, policies that will make sure that we actually diversify. I think that's what we must start to look at critically.
Now, some of the challenges with the telltale signs that the world is fast migrating towards clean and renewable energy is the fact that some oil majors in Nigeria are also selling off some of their shares and stakes and more like moving out of the country gradually. What would you say, in your opinion, is happening in our oil exploration sector that is forcing this trend of many oil majors pulling out of that sector of the economy?
Right. You agree with me that most of these companies are very vast in research. They research even 10 years ahead of what is likely going to happen. So they foresee a lot of things. Perhaps the Nigerian economy is not even encouraging. So sometimes they like to be where they will not have issue of this dollar naira issues. So I think they have seen the hands that in future there's going to be serious diversification. So because of that, Shell, among others, are thinking about moving to the other cleaner energy, to make sure that they are into the business, and that's quite worrisome because if the global community are moving away from oil and we are still there, it's a problem. We are supposed to be in tandem with what the world is saying. Though from the way I see things, I think oil is still going to be with us for the next 30 years. But what happened after 30 years? And that's why this confab that is coming is another thing for Nigeria to enjoy diversification, because if you have seen that we also need to move core into technology. It's a good thing. Look at Indian. As at 20, 30 years back, you see Indians moving out of the country, out of their country to other country, and they now do diaspora remittance. So if people are also japa, and it could also be converted to economic advantage, japa, and you find a way that they should also have a remittance into Nigeria. So we must find a way to diversify. However, those international
Now, it may seem as though we lost connection with Dr. Aliu Elias there.
Organization that are moving out of.
I think the connection is getting better now. Doctor, just reiterate the last point you were looking to make. For a minute. We lost you.
Right. I'm trying to just analyze that it's quite important if we can make sure that we also follow the trend and make sure that we don't get caught, by surprise by the global community cutting away from the oil and gas. We must also follow the trend and make sure that we keep tab. If we are doing electric, if they are on electric vehicle, let us also join them. Perhaps I think in the next 30 years we will still remain in oil will still be valid in the next 30 years. But
Now,
that's
with
why
this,
the
your
confab is
projections
also
that we
moving.
might still have oil in the next 30 years, we're also looking at the report is issued by the Nigerian Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative that told us that on an average, 1.34 trillion naira is lost annually owing to oil theft. They were also recommending that we have a tracker system that can monitor the oil wells in the Niger Delta, and even when they're transported across the country from point of lifting to point of drop off, we can be able to monitor this. Now, do you think
Well,
that this is indeed a step that can curb the large scale industrial theft of our natural resource?
when you recall that when President Bola Ahmed Tinubu came into power alongside Emile Kyari, there was a serious effort in curbing oil theft in Niger Delta, and in fact, they employed Tom Polo, among others, to actually guide it. I was thinking it would make a very meaningful one because we all need Nigeria today. We need to increase our oil production. That is what, because like in your analysis, we are not meeting OPEC
Quarter.
demand, let alone Dangote demand. So when you meet OPEC demand, that you are going to meet Dangote demand. So for me, I think we need to do more to reduce oil theft and corruption alongside our oil. So it's very, very important.
There's also the issue of amounts owed, according to the NNPC, over 2.8 trillion naira. What happens to this backlog? A backlog that is still being owed. How can the marketers on one hand and even the federation accounts get the monies accruing to it?
You recall that NNPC immediately came out and said they are not owing. It's just a business transaction where you get an item and you pay back later. I think that's what they are trying to say. But owing in business sometimes is not a bad thing if you can have your plan on how to actually pay back. Because if you have a credit world, if you are credit worthy, it's not bad to actually owe. But the thing is, that's why we must make sure that our refinery works. If our refinery works, it will be our oil, it will be our refined product, it will be our sales, and we're consuming it domestically. And that's why we must also support Dangote to actually be effective. I'm sure today, October 2nd, from yesterday, October 1, they said they're going to supply Dangote in Naira, and that's what we are expecting. So we are going to be expecting a better price for Nigeria, because if we don't take control of this sector, if we don't have the right, we are rent seeking as at before now. Before we now have Dangote, we are hoping that we also have the Nigerian refinery working. If we continue to be rent seeker, we'll just be seeing and will not benefit from the oil and gas. And as it lasts, we need to benefit from it. In terms of NAITI, I think NAITI is doing a good job to have bring it. It's a government agency that is also bringing out such information that's quite alarming out, that we have to be careful in terms of a level of oil theft. But I think President Bola Ahmed Tinubu and Miliki should sustain their efforts when they came early and in the first 6 months, the way they are trying to fight oil theft. If not, we are going to be at the receiving end.
Now, I'm talking about divestments in the oil and gas industry. We continue to talk about how much of gas we have in Nigeria untapped. Projections that we have between over 102.3 trillion cubic feet of gas untapped. And it almost feels as though we continue to flare this gas going forward. Many look at the provisions in the PIA Act for a maximum of 10 years tax holiday for investments in gas. Despite these provisions, what, in your opinion, would you say is deterring foreign direct investments in divesting our gas resources?
Right. Let's first and foremost, let me talk to you about the advantage. If you go to organize a country, let me use that language. Gas are being piped to people's home, whereby you just open it like the way you open tap, you use it, it will be pay as you go. But in Nigeria, upon that we have it in abundance, it's just flaring away. But now that we are also trying to convert, I can tell you that most people that actually converted their gas and their vehicle to gas are also having queue. That's our fear. I spoke with a taxi man. I told him, Oga, why have you not converted your car to CNG? He said, my brother, Nigeria is a dangerous country. By the time everybody open their eyes and move into gas, it will become like petroleum where we have to queue 2, 3 days to buy it again. It's saddening that even a common man will also reason to that aspect. So I think, and for PFDI to come into gas, it's not easy the way you mention it, because first and foremost, they will look at the challenges of the Nigeria economy. Inflation at about 32%. You see a lot of insecurity. A lot of things are discouraging this international community from coming to invest, because when you want to invest, you look at a lot of indices, look at a lot of things, and you project for 20 years. When you invest, you may not gain your money in the next 5 years. So you look at what happened after 10 years. Is there going to be policy somersault? Is there going to be are you going to have stability in the polity? A lot of things that need to, perhaps we are supposed to encourage the indigenous company that will have confidence in our country to invest. But the problem is that, where do you want them to get the fund? They should go to the bank where they will get interest rate at 35%. We will go there to get fund. These are the problems surrounding investment in Nigeria. But I think government should take the lead. By taking the lead, I saw yesterday that there is a license for 5 indigenous companies to start producing gas, and it was so beautiful when I saw them getting it. But the thing is, they are getting the certificate. Are they also having access to the fund? That is the problem.
Now, moving away from gas, another way we can diversify economy, many continue to look at our tax generation. But the challenge here is foregone tax owing to tax holidays and actual revenue collected. Once you look at this across board, be it custom duty tax and the other types of tax we have in the country, why is there this still huge disparity in foregone tax and actual collected revenue?
Well, one of the best things that this president has actually embarked on is to institute a committee on tax and fiscal policy. I think it's a very good thing. I still listened to some of their plan yesterday. If we can have that implemented, because we are still using about 1960, acts or that we have. If we can actually move to what Taiwo Yodili led committee are proposing, to be a good thing for small businesses, and the multiplication of tax from local government, state, and multiplicity that will not be there again, because they want to collect. They want to say that, okay, we will collect 5% of VAT, and also, we will collect 100%, give 95% to state and take 5%. That would have guided it. So I think what they are bringing, according to them, one of the policy will be gazetted today, and we are hoping that the National Assembly today, tomorrow, will also start reviewing the review and repeal new bills that will help taxation in Nigeria. The only challenge they have is that they will actually want to move VAT from 7.5 to 10% as well. But they said if you are an MSME that is doing below 50 million or so, you may not be in that. You will be excluded in some taxation. I think we must get our fiscal policy right, because if we get it right to attract small businesses, you recall that small scale will have to in future move to a large scale. So if you protect the small scale, large scale businesses, I think with a lot of policy direction, that would have be good, because I can tell you most businesses suffer double taxation in Nigeria.
Now, there's a part of tax we don't talk about too often, particularly with the concern on our states of our road infrastructure. There is a provision for the road infrastructure tax credit scheme. But often at times, when we talk about the lack of road constructions or repair across major roads, the East-West Road, we're looking at new road contracts like the Coastal Highway, whilst we have trunk A roads that are supposed to be serviced in Nigeria. Why do you think that most times the government does not make for this provision to address our current road challenges?
Well, I think we have a Federal Road Maintenance Agency, FEMA, but the only thing is that according to the Minister of Works, he said they only have 13 billion So when you have 13 billion to repair Nigerian road, it becomes a serious question that can that even fix only two state road? But the question, the joy is that according to the minister David Umahi, he said they are going to toll a lot of road. Makurdi Road, East West Road, most road they are fixing, they said they are going to toll it. So by the time they toll it, I'm expecting them that they'll be raising some money from that road that will go into repair, because there isn't for repair. But beyond repair too, we need to work on our roads, our infrastructure. We must not build infrastructure that will last for 10 years. At this age, it should be at least 50 years before we can even think of major maintenance, which is very, very key. So I think with tolling of the most of those roads, we can have more money to fix those roads if it does not go into corruption again.
Now, Dr. Ali, will help us and our viewers especially understand this concept of independent revenue based on the concept of having government-owned enterprises. Now, there's the issue of the single treasury account. In collecting this revenue continues to draw some lacuna for corruption to thrive in those enterprises. How can the government achieve this use of the TSA and recoup its investments in surplus invested in its owned enterprises?
Right. That's part of our expectation when the president said he's going to have a minister, stay on administration who focus on the key performance indicator of ministers. Remember, all these MDAs, all these agencies are under a minister. So sometimes I think we have to change our pattern by giving them some level of targets that in your administration, these are what we want you to actually work on, so that you can really measure them alongside. TSA has come to solve a lot of problems if we actually maximize it. And I think it's been relaxed during this President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. You recall that most people even carry out contracts. You don't get paid by the ministry, you get paid directly by CBN. There's a way everything goes into the TSA, which is a good one. So I think we just have to uphold it more and make sure that every income actually come into the TSA before it can actually go out. Before now, the ministries, the agencies can actually make their money, and when they make their money, they will not be the one to remit to government. But now everything should come to government. If it comes to government, from that, you now propose what you need to collect, and government will now give you back. But you can't put NNPC in that. I think they are special agency. You also recall that it is called NNPCL among others now. So I think we need to make sure that the TSA work more.
Now, I heard you mention about the role of ministers in ensuring this transparency, and I'm wondering how about the Fiscal Responsibility Commission as empowered by the Fiscal Responsibility Act? Is there room for synergy between the ministers and the commission?
Well, I think that's another thing. You remember, even Fiscal Responsibility Commission is under somewhere. But the thing is, they are supposed to monitor how much comes in, how much goes out, just like the way it means. You must, it was 5% condition that you must actually make, not collect more than, of what you make earlier before. So sometimes it has to be stringent, when you are trying to open it and make it easy for somebody to become, and that's what we suffered during President Muhammadu Buhari. They want to make the law easy for president and easy for some agency, but it must be as it's supposed to be. You must return it as supposed to be. So you must make sure you make a particular amount and get less, some percentage of what you make. It makes them to work more. So I think the Fiscal Responsibility Commission need to work more in terms of even our budget and our budget, because when they are bringing their proposal, you have to look at what they actually brought and against what they're actually asking for. But we need to just do more. But I can call this president. I think if there's anything he knows how to do very well, he knows how to collect money from people very well. And I can testify to it, more money through fiscal approach, which is our custom. Our custom is even becoming a revenue based, not fiscal responsibility, because sometimes it's not about money, it's about how to use it to control the economy as well. But if you see first subsidy removal, if you see Naira floating, it brings more income to the coffer of the federal government. So I think they are, in terms of revenue, they are doing well. The only thing that is being eroded by also the same floating of Naira.
Now, let's also talk about some other ambiguities in following the money as it concerns citizens who are looking to ensure there is transparency and accountability in the process. It's the concept of statutory transfers. Usually, they are appropriated and presented to the public in bulk sums. Many civil society organizations continue to ask, why can't we have detailed breakdown of what this statutory transfers to the National Assembly, the National Judiciary Council, the Niger Delta Commission, and the likes who enjoy this statutory transfer? Do you think that if we have this detailed breakdown, our quest to being more transparent and accountable will be seen by all Nigerians?
Right. Ideally, transparency brings accountability. It is what you see that you can follow. That's what we call follow the money. It is when you see it, you can actually follow where it is expending for, what is expending. I think there's nothing should be hidden. But you could see even from President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, the transparency is not as expected. If you could purchase a yacht before you bring it to the up, if you could purchase an aircraft before we get to know, if you could buy a vehicle before we get to know, that means it's not following the appropriation as expected. And the same thing is happening. But we need to do more. And that's why we hold our National Assembly accountable, because their job is to do oversight, led by Godswill Akpabio. They need to do more in terms of oversight. And as a civil society organization too, we need to find a way to get that details. And that's why we always say, well done, Sarah, because I think they are doing more in terms of doing those basic research. Even budget is also doing more, but we all need to come on board to make sure we do more, to make sure that government is accountable.
Now, the National Council on Public Procurement is supposed to have an arm owing to the National Procurement Act of 2007, but it almost feels as though that inter-ally use of having a portal on which the bidding process and contracting award for public procurement is supposed to be done has been somewhat neglected. What do you think are some of the challenges hampering that and giving room for corruption in public procurement?
Right. I think, when you look at Bureau of Public Procurement or Procurement Council, I think they're actually doing well, because you recall that what brought about them was a serious issue because of the poor procurement processes, in terms of the abandoned projects, in terms of bad appropriation, in terms of not utilizing donor money very well. But the fact just remains that, there's what we call letter of no objection. So most of them, they go back to them and say, okay, we need a letter of no objection because of A, B, and C. However, they need to be transparent more, because if they are transparent in their own area, it will make the society or Nigerians to have much more detail in terms of projects. And that's why during the President Muhammad Buhari, all the projects that we have ongoing by President Jonathan, Buhari made sure that he actually achieved, and that's one of his political scores, to make sure that he's actually achieved, finished some of those projects. But in terms of transparency, we just have to continue to hammer on transparency. You recall that even the Federal Executive Council, some of their approvals are supposed to also go to a particular council ahead of that, supposed to be maybe former chief judge, former head of, but they never organize that. Even President Obasanjo, Yaradua, all the past presidents never institute that. So those are the things we still have challenge on. But in terms of looking into what people are appropriating, I think Nigerians should do more by having interest in every appropriation.
Now, another issue that continues to raise concern is diaspora remittances. Whilst we're looking to diversify options of increasing the country's revenue, we continue to see the humongous amounts that are published as diaspora remittances, but in terms of its use in government, most Nigerians still are yet to understand how it betters the lots of the country. Could you help us shed more light on that?
When they say diaspora remittance, it does not really mean that it comes to government coffer. Me and you can have uncle in one of those countries that will be sending money to us, but it's only that governments take account of it, and by so doing, they can say these are what we actually have. But that's why remittance is expected to make our forex, better, in terms of we'll have much more dollar in assets, and it's also helped the foreign reserve. These are the benefits of the diaspora remittance, and that's part of the instruments that is supposed to be used by CBN to actually control this forex problem. I can tell you that major problem of Nigeria, 1 trillion, 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 is forex issue. If you look at even the trouble we are having in oil and gas, it's forex problem. If you look at our inflation that we are actually having, can be also attributed to forex problem. So if you can solve that forex problem to an extent, that would have solved our issue. So diaspora remittance, like I said earlier, these are what some other countries are benefiting. They have accounts and details of all the citizens that travel out, and they have a way of making sure that they actually return to things to their main country, and that's what India has actually practices. You see them everywhere in the world, and by so doing, they're actually bringing something back to their country. So we need to do more to expand the diaspora remittance.
Now, I'm talking about foreign exchange. The other day, in a private chat between yourself and I, we're looking at something you called a policy somersault. And it's from the angle of approach of our apex bank, the CBN, in addressing this exchange gap. The current administration chose to float the naira, remove the exchange rate cap, but it almost seems as though, despite interventions to selected BDCs, the gap between the naira and the dollar closes in some months, and in other months just continues to widen. Take, for instance, in the last few days, it's on the average 1,650 naira to a dollar. How do we achieve this much softer stability of the naira with the approach the CBN is taking? Do you foresee any respite in the coming weeks?
Right. So far, if you ask me, I think Yemi Cardoso-led CBN has not got it right in terms of forex. And reason being that you could see that he has churned out over 40 policy framework to actually bring about a solution to this, and he has not got it right. And it's a factor of floating of naira, because there is no country in the world, I can tell you, that will leave that to the willing buyer willing seller. And you could see them coming back again to actually give money to sell dollar to BDC. That shows that there's a serious policy some and sort. I think we need to also guide it. Let me give you a good example. Look at Dangote refinery. So if Dangote is getting is getting a window to access its dollars to actually produce, as it were, it will reflect in how much it's going to sell, and it will reflect how much the consumer are going to buy it. That would have solved our problem. So there should be selected areas in which government will have interest in terms of providing forex. You cannot leave it all out, because you have floated the naira and you have also removed fuel subsidy. You are supposed to take one. The two variables together is what is bringing us this problem. But for me, I think government should go back to manage the floating of naira.
Well, I must thank you, Dr. Aliu Elias, for sharing your perspective. It almost feels as though we've largely discussed issues of the economy as it should be, occasioned by the LCII's recommendation to the country to diversify its sources of revenue other than over depending on oil. We appreciate you.
Thank you for having me.
Well, that's as much as we can take with Dr. Aliu Elias on our review of local newspapers. Still to come on the show this morning, we'll turn our attention to the foreign scene and give you an overview of what the tabloids and foreign newspapers have as headline stories to give you a broader perspective of the world around you as it concerns foreign perspectives. When we come back, we'll come back home at 9 o'clock to talk more on the issue of our beloved nation Nigeria at 64, in line with the agitation and protest on the rising cost of living and hardship occasioned by some of the policies of the current administration. Do well to stay with us.
Step into the heartbeat of the world, where news meets real talk. From breakthroughs in diplomacy to humanitarian challenges and scientific milestones, Global Digest takes you beyond the headlines and straight to the heart of the matter. I am Amma Marcus. Be a part of the world's unfolding stories at 3 p.m. on ADBN, channel 258 on DSTV, and Star Times, channel 140. Global Digest, your window to the world's current affairs, only on Advocate Broadcasting Network.
Congratulations, Honorable Tajuddin Abbas, CFR, Speaker of the House of Representatives, on your well-deserved conferment as a Commander of the Order of the Federal Republic, CFR. Your excellence and commitment to service has earned you this prestigious honor. Advocate Broadcasting Network celebrates you.
Welcome to the world where innovation meets opportunity, where ideas become empires. This is Market TV.
I am Idorian Flannan, and every week I'll be taking you inside the dynamic world of marketing and commercial business.
From groundbreaking startups to big businesses, Market TV brings you the best pricing and latest goods on display.
It's all about understanding your audience and staying ahead of the trends.
Witness the creative processes that drive the various brands.
Join us as we dive deep into the strategies that shape the commercial landscape, from streets to traditional advertising and social media. We cover it all.
Whether you're a seasoned professional or an aspiring entrepreneur, Market TV provides the insights you need to thrive.
This show gave us the tool to turn our vision into reality.
So, if you're ready to master the market, tune into Market TV every Saturday at 6 p.m.
Happy Independence and welcome to the Weather Forecast. We're starting the day with morning thunderstorms over parts of Adamawa, Taraba, Kaduna, Sokoto, Zamfara, and Kebbi. Expect this condition to extend into parts of the Federal Capital Territory, Nasarawa, Niger, and Benue. To the south, we will see similar storm activity affecting the southeastern region and areas of Ondo, Edo, and Ebonyi State. As we move into the afternoon, the prospect of thunderstorms will increase, particularly in the southern region and the north central cities. Meanwhile, parts of the northwest and the northeast may experience lighter conditions. Stay safe and keep an eye on the skies.
Now, thanks for staying with us on the program. Let's quickly cross over to the foreign scene and give you some of the prominent headlines as captured on the dailies. Well, the world has watched over the last 48 hours as Iran has released an onslaught on Israel, firing over 200 rockets. Now, the US is serving as a big brother to Israel and has also warned Iran about severe sanctions should they persist. Now, this leads a couple of the headline stories on the foreign newspapers this morning. And first with, let's visit the front page of the Daily Express, where this story is headlined. Now, beneath the masthead on the Daily Express, you'd find the catchphrase leading the headline: more than 200 ballistic missiles rain down in huge bombardments. US threatens severe response as Iran attacks Israel. Now, this is a challenging development in the night skies, showing some of the aftermath of the missile launch is captured in the picture that follows. More on this is captured on the news page 4 of the Daily Express. Now, this story is also another prominent story in the news, and moving away from the front page of the Daily Express, on our next newspaper this morning, the Daily Mail, you'd find a similarity in this headline feature, as it has the catchphrase, Middle East in flames. The headline reads, the Iron Dome holds firm against Iran's 200 missile blitz. Now, Israel vows revenge. Now, this is one of the technological advancements, and many continue to talk about Israel's superiority when it comes to its own internal defense, owing to that strategic placing of the Iron Domes to protect against projectiles thrown from the enemy. Now, away from this newspaper, more reports are captured on the Daily Telegraph. On the Daily Telegraph, this issue, as it concerns the war between Iran and Israel, is pictured boldly on the front page with missiles raining down from the night skies as you have the caption, Iran attacks Israel. On the rider, a rocket missed me by a minute and then came the onslaught, is a report by the global security editor of the New Telegraph, Paul Nuki, who tells us more in-depthly on this situation. Now, moving away from the New Telegraph, the story is a recurrent decimal across other newspapers this morning. On The Guardian as well, we have more reports on the situation as it continues to develop. The Guardian this morning reports the incidents as Israel vows to retaliate after Iran launches missile attacks. Now, some of the straplines read, air assault is 24 hours after Netanyahu ordered incursion into Lebanon. Tehran justifies strike as legal, rational, and legitimate response. Salvo of more than 180 missiles fired at targets across country. Now, leaving this newspaper, let's also look at the publication as granted by The Australian. The editorial perspective is more on the ground forces with armored tanks pictured on The Australian this morning. Now, on The Australian, you'd find that picture of armored tanks, and above which you'd find the catchphrase, Australia opposes Israel strikes to stop October 7 repeats. White flag, Albanese, is the caption. Israeli invasion, a limited attack. Not scared of cops flying flags for Hezbollah. Now, this is one of the biggest stories from the foreign perspective this morning. And away from this, let's look at all the newspapers that do not somewhat report this disaster in the way it was painted by the few we've seen. On the Financial Times, it chooses for itself a more subtle approach to this reportage. As it reads, Iran fires missile barrage against Israel. Tehran launches assault hours after IDF ground offense in Lebanon. Targets hit in center and south, but many of the 180 rockets intercepted. Biden convenes security meeting as threats of all-out region war mounts. On the rider, Jay-Z leads walkout of celebrity clients from accountant BDO after theft claims. Now we have two more papers to glance through as we wrap up on the foreign scene. And I would first of all look at the New York Times, and then we'll look at the Wall Street Journal as we wrap up this segment. On the New York Times this Wednesday, a couple of stories. Let's look at those that can be quite eligible to be read out. Beneath the masthead, you have breaking up with China is hard to do. U.S. officials alarmed as adversary bolsters ties. And he wasn't a billionaire, he just played one on TV. The Apprentice conjured a version of Trump that became his political brand. Talking about the role and influence of television in shaping up perspectives of national figures. Now, lastly, on the Wall Street Journal, Iran launches missiles at Israel is the headline, but all the feature stories beneath that, you'd find Vance, Walz spar debate over abortion, immigration. China's housing gulch collides with its shrinking population. And this is the overview of headline stories as captured by the foreign newspapers on the review this morning. Be reminded that you can get a more in-depth analysis into the world around you on our in-house program, Global Digest, later at 3 p.m. today. Now, in keeping with the spirit of Nigeria's 64th independence anniversary, it will be time now for us to begin a more in-depth review of some of the highlights and activities that marked the celebration of our nation's independence, but more so with the caution of the sober mood at the moment, occasioned by hardship and hunger. Some Nigerians had shown desire to hit the streets for a demonstration to protest the ongoing rise in the cost of living. It was tagged the hashtag Fearless in October protests, before which we had the hashtag End Bad Governance protests. But one of the challenges is that it has seemed not to have brought about any change in the price of PMS, in the hike in electricity tariff, in the hike of liquefied petroleum gas, and other energy sources in the country. Commodity food, across the market too, has experienced a hike, with inflation reportedly above 32.15%. Now, on the program this morning, we're looking to be joined by Marvel Joseph Essien, who is an organizational development consultant, to review some of the demands for accountability as projected by most Nigerians. Now, and if we have established our connection with Marvel Joseph Essien, let's say good morning and see if we can begin this conversation. Hello, good morning to you, sir, and welcome and thanks for joining us. I'm having difficulties hearing you, but I believe if the connection is all right from our Uyo studios, we can get your thoughts on the developments in line with Nigeria's 64th independence anniversary. Well, we still can't hear each other. There is some challenge with having the connectivity based on audio quite clear, but the visuals are okay as we look to join Marvel Joseph Essien from our Uyo studios. But just like I highlighted, some of the issues to be discussed are based on the approach of the current administration towards the yearning of Nigerians. Many Nigerians blame the current hardship on certain policies and rhetorics made by President Bola Ahmed Tinubu dating back to his inaugural speech where he said subsidy was gone. Subsequently, the promises to assuage the yearnings of Nigeria with the provision of alternative sources of mass transportation have only seen 64 CNG buses delivered to students and labor. We're told that another 2,000 tricycles would be disbursed, but this is far away from the 3,500 as promised, earmarked by the Presidential Gas Initiative. Now, amidst these challenges have been protests and demonstrations across cities in Nigeria in different phases. We're looking to review some of the demands made, with the hashtag Fearless in October protest now being characterized by some section of the media as having a political agenda. The likes of activist Showere was seen in Lagos leading a procession. Does this align with the original hashtag End Bad Governance in Nigeria protest? How different is the hashtag Fearless in October protest? And going into the last concluding months of 2024, are we expecting any respite? Mind you, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu yesterday did intimate Nigerians on the need for a 30-day confab, where youth representatives will be given a platform to advise the government. Recommendations are expected. But with all this being the situation, some persons point their fingers to protesters who were remanded, incarcerated owing to their involvement and the use of tear gas in some sports. It's a broad discussion, and we're hoping to pick it a piece at a time to get the perspectives of most Nigerians, much like yourself and I, and also Marvel Joseph Essien, if our connection is now much better. Let's head back to our Uyo studios and see if we now have a more fluid connection. Hello, good morning to you once again, Mr. Essien. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you very well now.
Oh, beautiful. I can hear you too as well. A happy independence anniversary. Now let's get straight into the discussion. Let's get your thoughts on the mood around yesterday's celebration. Low-keyed in some area, disgruntlement in others, the cutting of ceremonial cakes in some seats of power across states and even at Aso Villa. What did you make of yesterday's observance of our Independence Day?
Yesterday just came like in the last about 20 years or so, we've been celebrating independence in a very low-key manner. You see, the economic situation may have been responsible for this because, like I would always say, we have so many reasons to celebrate our independence, even though we may not have the means for now to celebrate the independence. Yesterday's own was a bit different because like you may have also observed that the protest, bad government protest, is it fearless, like that, propped up in many cities in Nigeria yesterday. Abuja was part of it. We witnessed a very peaceful protest in Lagos. We also saw that there was a bit of a crisis in Abuja, and allegedly there were some arrests in Kano. That's not what it should be for an Independence Day celebration. But all the protesters, some of the highlights they showed was about the cost of living, which of course was also addressed by Mr. President in his speech earlier in the morning. That he acknowledged that, of course, this is the situation that we find ourselves. In my own opinion, I would think that we rather should continue with dialogue and have suggestions on ways we could make our economy better instead of embarking on protest. Protest is a legitimate right, protest now. But given our circumstances in Nigeria, where we often mistake for a time of rioting, or sometimes people with good intentions to aid their views go on the streets and found it being hijacked by miscreants, and it would result in government properties being damaged. Sometimes people lose their personal properties. Business places may be touched on such a riot, in such a riotous situation. That is not what it should be. Therefore, if people are to embark on a protest and they align with the security agencies, and the security agencies on their part to well coached on how to manage such situations, then of course there's nothing wrong in protest. But we are, in my own opinion, I think we should be more concerned about bringing out solution to what problem there, bearing in mind that of course we have been having challenges in Nigeria dating back to the time of our independence in 1960. We have also been having political challenges in Nigeria dating back to the time of even prior to our independence. If you remember the motion as it was moved for independent Nigeria by Anthony Enahoro in 1953 and moved again in 1956. And you remember that some protectorates in Nigeria, in fact particularly the Northern Protectorate, protested that they don't want independence. But of course we still moved ahead and struggled to get independence in 1960. That was part of political challenges. Soon after that political challenges, we also had, 6 years after we had the Civil War, and it was a very big one. Apart from the Civil War, some people had thought that the June 12, 1993 crisis in Nigeria, that Nigeria will never remain as a country again. But of course, I think we learned our lessons in the crisis we had in 1967. I'm talking about the Civil War. And based on those crises that we had, and from that crisis, we began to lessons. If you also cast your mind back, you remember how NC and the Action Congress parties were doing their campaigns and how riotous it used to be, the challenges we used to have even during campaigns and election day and so on. Even up to the time of NPN, UPN, that 2017 election, the kind of crisis we used to have, that we have recorded some improvement over time. Nigeria is evolving, Nigeria is improving. We have had 25 years of uninterrupted democracy so far. It is worth celebrating Nigeria coming out from those woods. And we also know that some government, a military government in Nigeria said, money is not our problem, but how to spend it. Is that physical discipline that we lacked at that time has impacted us up till now, and for us to find our track back, it's not going to be that smooth and easy. We also remember in this country when a civilian government were importing champagne and sometimes customizing those champagnes for celebrations or for their consumption in Nigeria. That appetite for such imported consumption are dating back to 1960s, to 90s, to 1980s, is what is impacting us today. And like the president rightly postulated in his speech, that if we keep going on that track, that Nigeria would be doomed. Of course, I believe so, and that is so correct. And of course, now that we are embarking on reforms, we should support the government in embarking through these reforms. But it actually needs the government keep educating reforms.
Can we revisit some of the comments made by President Bola Ahmed Tinubu and some of the recommendations in the opposite? Notably, the president yesterday intimated Nigerians of his desire to confirm a 30-day confab to have youth groups represented to give recommendations to the government. Now, the MBF is asking what has happened to the 2014 National Confab and its recommendations. Do you think there is a need for President Bola Ahmed Tinubu to revisit recommendations made on the then President Goodluck Jonathan in a way to somewhat have a background for this 30-day conference he is proposing?
The 30-day conference by the president is highly commendable. Of course, we may want to say President Jonathan organized a national conference and that conference was not implemented. But like I would always say, there is nothing wrong about continuing in dialogue. It's all fair and good for us to continue discussing these things, for us to continue having people place out their ideas, air out their views regarding how we should run this country. As the 30 days conference proposed by the president is being contemplated. Of course, the youth have a right or a role to play in contributing to the growth of Nigeria and making their own submission to what Nigeria is going to, where Nigeria should be. And it is highly commendable that the president is backing on that initiative. Part of a platform that should be seen by example, those protesting yesterday, to know that there is a platform in place that they can come out and make their contribution and aid their views. Sometimes when people talk about these protests, I heard some protesters saying yesterday that the price of fuel should come down. If we have a true knowledge of what it is and how the Naira has been devalued and the impact of how it has impacted on fuel price, we have a good knowledge of the economic metrics surrounding this decision of fuel subsidy and all that. I think we would also be putting others and people in a better state to understand how to contribute to this discussion, to this conversation, whether it's based on fuel subsidy or whether it is based on food prices, as we have seen how food inflation has really skyrocketed as days. We can also link it to insecurity. We can also link of transportation. If we have all this understanding, then we'll be bringing out ideas on how to put away insecurity, on how to and how to make this Naira very strong in order for us to be able to reduce the fuel price and how to make our refineries work. We should be making contributions in that to government that we think you should do it. You should support the modular refineries in this way. We think we should support the private refineries in this way and that way. Those contributions, that conversation would help government better, because it's not just about government, it's about Nigeria. Government is about the people, and it is the people that have put the government there. And if we are not satisfied with the way government are going about things, we support them with ideas, we support them with intellectual discussions, we engage the government intellectually in order to find solutions to where we are finding ourselves. We should also be making contributions in terms of our reforms and what we should do about our electoral reforms in a manner that it will stabilize the country. Recently, the government have heard the Federal Executive Committee talking about the Economic Stabilization Bill. And if you read, you see that it is a very bill fixed with high hopes. But the implementation, how is it going to be done, especially the aspect where states are supposed to support the federal government by not collecting certain level of taxes and so on. If it is implementable, if it is practical that it would be done, then of course we know small businesses will find relief in this through this economic stabilization bill, and will make the country more productive. And as the country is moving towards production, then we would also know that we are strengthening the Naira, and if the purchasing power of individuals are well strengthened, then of course we know that the economy would gradually get better. We should also lose sight of the achievements of government in terms of what they have done at a level that is yet to trickle down to the micro level. We should also support them in that way. I also commend the CB talked about the fundamentals. My understanding of the fundamentals he discussed was about propping up, making sure that we are able to increase our production. and not just relying on oil revenue.
Now,
And of
Mr.
course,
Essien,
he
some
also
of the challenges with these socio-economic indicators you've talked about brings to mind the conversation based on political independence and economic independence. There are a lot of assertions that some of the challenges Nigeria is facing today is as a result of depending on Bretton Woods institutions, the likes of the World Bank, IMF, to give us recommendations on how to grow our economy, other than relying on homegrown solutions. Many Nigerians continue to ask why we are over-dependent on oil, and why can't we, much like when agriculture was the mainstay of our economy, have more investments in the agri value chain? Do you think that Nigeria, in some sense, hasn't made efforts in 64 years towards achieving some level of economic independence?
It's a sovereign country. When we keep emphasizing on the role of IMF and other foreign agencies regarding the growth of Nigeria, it doesn't really go down well with because we are a sovereign country. We know that we have come from a history of economic situation where we will always be asking what do we do and what do we not do to strengthen our economy. But we also remember that before oil, that we were very strong in our agricultural system, agricultural economy was very strong before oil came. It was when oil came and we lost focus on where we should put our focus. That is when we lost track of what we should, the attention we should have paid to production in terms of the economic aspect of it. So we have also seen us coming through austerity measures, structural adjustment, and all sort of programs. People will think, and of course we may know that some of those were international bank, international IMF, international monetary fund issues, or the World Bank issues, that they just make suggestions to the country. But the sovereignty of the country remains, and we think that we should also be thinking indigenously on how to impact on our economy. And if these suggestions from the World Bank or IMF are not correct or are not serving us right, then we have a right to sit as a sovereign country to decide on the path to go. It is not the World Bank that would make us have appetite for foreign goods, for example, to be importing spoon, plates, toothpicks, and so on. We also can see a way to go to see how we can strengthen our economy. There are many governments that have come and spoken about us strengthening internal production. We have taken policies statement about banning imports, about placing high excise duties and all that, to see how we can manage our economy until the recent times where CBN has had to devalue the naira so much, which I think has encouraged export to a large extent, that we are having a trade surplus today. We are evolving, but on the whole, we cannot that we have not achieved so much politically and economically. We have achieved to some extent that we are able to say that we and to follow. So if we're looking at the economic side, of course we are making progress. That progress at this time that we are having economic reforms in our country requires us to look inwards more, to be more indigenous in our, see how we can be more patriotic, to see how we can drive the country to where we should. And politically too, we came from a background where we are doing manual voting. We are moving towards electronic voting. We have not achieved that yet, but of course we have taken series of steps to see how we can achieve electronic voting, which would be far more reliable than any other voting standard. So political.
Let's also talk about the political independence perspectives in terms of our system of governance. We've seen in Nigeria pre-colonialism, post-colonialism that has attempted to adopt the parliamentary system in some states and also metamorphosed into the presidential system. Now, at this particular time, some members of the National Assembly are also proposing a rotational presidency, the creation of more states, the creation of more region. And many are asking, is this in some bid to find a homegrown solution to agitations, marginalization, and the principle of federal character which we envision in electing those chosen leaders to govern us. My question now is, how would you assess Nigeria's growth through political independence, owing to the systems of government we have adopted from the Britain on one hand, the Americans on the other, and with this proposal by some members of the National Assembly on the table of our federal legislators?
The situation that we find ourselves, when we talk about leadership, the situational leadership is always the best. And at the situation, at the circumstances we are finding ourselves today in Nigeria, we need to be circumspect, thinking and suggesting solutions to our problems. Of course, Nigeria has come through a bit of ways. We've operated the parliamentary system, like you have said. We've also operated the presidential system. But of course, some people may argue that we just hijacked a presidential system without really looking domestic the presidential system to suit us. The question on zoning, this particular period of our politics is okay for us to zone to the zones for now, but I think we should be moving more to adopt a system where we find a better candidates that really fit to run an election. That is talking about emphasis on merit. But you see, our system, when you talk about the federal character system, when you talk about the kind of things that we have in the Constitution that is promoting zoning one way or the other, is also reducing the emphasis that we should place on merit. As we are discussing this, if we also introduce independent candidacy, it would to a large extent neutralize the things that we are having, which may be playing down on merit, on the values of merit that is affecting our nation, even through federal government appointments, state government appointments, and find this zoning standing against the values of merit that we are supposed to promote. But on the whole, when you look at it and say, what is our circumstance at the present day? What is our situation at the present day? Then we would also say, well, as we are evolving towards this is that we may find that we need all these things in between to be able to sail through, to be able to move through circumstances smoothly without necessarily rocking the boat. So whether we adopt a zonal system, whether it's a presidential system, but we have to start somewhere. As we are starting, we will not think that the state governors will just lose their grips in the local government completely. It is going to be a gradual process. But all what I am saying, in my opinion, that it is all well and good for this process to have been gone. I commend the Supreme Court government, the federal government, for pushing through to have this local government autonomy, given the benefits, derivable, given the benefits that this is going to have in the general development of the nation. Because once this starts, we are going to see people paying more attention to the government at that level. And when people begin to pay attention to the government at that level, we begin to have more competent people with capacity, vying to become local governments. Then we know that it would, on the long run, turn to even assist the state government in their development strides. Because now, state government, it's not easy for you to oversee, maybe you have 30-something local or 20-something local government. It wouldn't be as easy